So, big news for you. After 4 terms in the State House of Representatives, you've decided you are not going to run for re-election, and big announcement, you want to be the next mayor of Austin.
Yeah, I found out a lot about myself during this time in the legislature and during my time in Austin, and I found out that I'm a fighter. I fight for what I believe in. I'm a woman with strong convictions, with a good reputation in the House, and I'm ready to take that energy and that focus and that conviction to a city that I want to fight for. I want to fight for a better Austin, and felt like we had a good announcement today and setting the stage. It's a long runway. We've got several months until the campaign, but I thought it was important to come out early, come out strong, and say let's do it.
You say you want to fight for a better Austin.
Yeah.
What does a better Austin look like?
I've seen, from my perspective, this little economic engine called Austin is doing wonderful. There's cranes, there's help wanted signs, but I don't feel as though we're respecting the women and the men who are driving this economic engine. They're child care workers, they're picking up the trash, they're teaching our kids, they're floating, taping, building these high rises, but they can't afford to live here anymore. We shouldn't be a city that welcomes the billionaires, but sends everybody who's working out to Goudeau and Bastrop. That's not my idea of the kind of Austin that we want.
You know, I'll be honest with you, I've been in Austin for 10 years now.
Yeah.
2022 makes 10 years, and this is something we've been hearing, the affordability crisis, for 10 years now. And for 10 years, no one's been able to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you think you can figure it out?
I had a real exploratory committee, like I really did. I talked to a lot of people, had a lot of small group discussions. It's unconscionable to me that even tax credit developers who are building affordable housing, why does it take them a year to get a building permit? They're tested, they're true, they're literally taking people off the streets and into a secured, cared, social work covered environment. Why does it take them a year? And not even a building permit, that's just the site plan. So I'm getting a lot of frustration with the city. We study and then we analyze, and then we study and then we analyze. And it's not that one woman can make a difference as mayor, but one woman and a new council, my hope, will send a message to the entirety of the council that real people are hurting and we need to take action.
You know, that's one of the things about Austin that I think people criticize is there's always studies for problems, but there are not necessarily fixes. You know, the building permit issue when it comes to affordability is just one piece of a very complicated puzzle. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that big puzzle is the fact that the city, it's a free market, if you will. Real estate, the city doesn't have the power to really drive down the cost of homes directly. So how do you feel as though, we'll get more housing built more quickly, but that housing would probably be, some of it, at market rate, which is, as you point out, unaffordable for most folks.
Yeah. We need all kinds of housing, whether it's market rate housing or affordable housing, and our definition of affordable is changing, right? The median price for a home is now well north of $500,000. So there is a role for the city to play, and I think there's a role for the business community to play, and to say it is time for all of us to realize that we're not only losing our diversity, we're one of a few American cities that has lost its population of Latinos and African Americans. We are not being that welcoming city that we think we are. But just put it in an economic terms. We are saying to the workers who are driving the engine, maybe there's a house for you in Goudeau or Bastrop, but not here. That's not sustainable to our economy, that we keep forcing people farther and farther out.
I want to talk to you about some of the other big issues facing the city of Austin, since we're talking about, a better Austin. When you think about the homelessness crisis that Austin is facing, which became a point of contention at the state capitol.
Yeah.
Obviously, legislation was passed banning outdoor camping, banning these homeless camps that Austin allowed and then disallowed again.
Yeah.
How do you feel as though you would want to address, or what things would you be doing to try to further address homelessness?
Well, The affordable housing is a part of that, because you've got affordable housing, you've got market rate housing, and then you've got the housing that in which a person who is coming off the street has multiple needs. I think it's not just about buy the hotels and then say I've done a good job. It's about invest and build those relationships. There's some great nonprofits that are doing this work, the social work part of what we're talking about. And it's a leadership thing. I think that there is a lot of frustration with the city, and this is going to be a really pivotal year, I think, Ashley, for not only is the mayor's race an open race, many city council spots are going to be open, and you know, it's a 10-1 system. There's 10 individuals with a very unique perch of what's been happening in their district or what could happen in their district. So it falls upon the city manager to implement. But my hope is that the voters will send a strong message to say, our neighbors are hurting, our city is in a damaged place, we have high expectations of you. Every election is a time to send that kind of a message, and I want to be a part of that.
So when we talk about working more basically with the organizations that are helping people with homelessness, you know, the city is trying to they're making big investments, the county is now making big investments. I think on some level, though, no matter how much money we're putting into the problem doesn't seem to get better.
Yeah, I've been meeting and will continue to meet with a lot of our experts in that arena, criminal justice, the social work, the mental health field. My sense is you can't just implement a program and then move on to something else. As I've said frequently, every week in an Israel administration would be Housing and Affordability Week. It's something you've got to take care of all the time. It's got to be top of mind. So that's my sense of it. There's a need for leadership on that issue in particular, and it means staying on top of it every day.
When we look at the issue of homelessness and affordability, I think another big piece of that is transportation.
Yeah.
And transportation in Austin is just a real, you know, sticking point. It's an issue all across Texas, obviously, but it is a big issue for folks here in Austin.
You know, I'm excited about the fact that the voters finally gave us the green light to say move forward on Project Connect and up our game on transit. It was way overdue. I've found that people are not anti-transit, they're anti-inefficiency. We need a system that works for everybody. I grew up on the bus system in El Paso. My dad was a truck driver. Mom never learned how to drive. For me, the bus was freedom, it was independence. But what we have right now is a system that doesn't work for everybody. Whether they're going to use the bus or not, my concern, and it's related to the affordability issue, is that there are women and men who are working really hard at their job. They're suiting up every day. They're one blown transmission away from not making it into work and from falling into a hardship time. So there is a connection between equity and transportation and affordability. It's been a lot of my work in the community, and I hope to bring that to the mayor's office.
You know, when we think about transit I think, though, is just one piece of the puzzle. This is Texas. Texans love their vehicles. They love their trucks. They love to be able to have their own cars. What about drivers? Because there are a lot of programs within the city where we are trying to make the city a more transit-friendly, a more bike-friendly city, but that comes at the cost of lanes for cars and adds to traffic congestion for folks.
You know, what that shouldn't come at the cost of is losing our neighbors because they interacted with a car. We are becoming an urban city. I don't think we always recognize the fact that we're the 11th largest city in the country, and cities are experiments in biology. We are changing all the time, and that means adapting to the urbanness that we are. I've heard testimony from families who have lost loved ones in interactions with cars. We've got to find a way to be more thoughtful, more careful, more attentive drivers, and I put a lot of my legislative expertise and time on transportation safety in particular. So I think we can all get along, we can work it out. We're losing too many of our fellow Texans and Austinites on these roads, and that's not something that we shouldn't even be using the word accidents. These aren't accidents. These are all preventable interactions with cars. So it's part of us growing and changing into the 11th and soon to be probably 10th largest city in the country.
And so for you, does that mean fewer cars on Austin roads?
It means thoughtful, calm traffic in neighborhoods. It means more access for cyclists. It means a more efficient transit system so that people can say, well, I can bike a mile and get on the bus and then I'm downtown. And it means when I've talked to people about transit, they say, well, I may not use the bus, but I know my neighbor's kid is trying to go to UT for nursing school. They're going to use that. We have to be thinking about collectively what are the ways that we are all going to get around or not get around in a telecommuting environment.
You know, I want to talk to you about policing in Austin, which, again, is one of those things where Austin makes policies that become big problems in terms of how state lawmakers react to it. That was obviously one of the big ones. Legislation was passed that required cities and counties, for that matter, but on a different piece of legislation, to commit to certain amounts of funding and not be able to cut funding for police departments.
Yeah.
Which kind of, you know, for Austin, they would say this really set us back in our idea of how we were going to reimagine policing in Austin. How would you like to see the city move forward with policing? What things do you think need to be done?
I was on the police monitor board years ago. Mayor Garcia at the time asked me to serve. And I've been thinking a lot about a woman named Sophia King that your viewers may not remember. But she was a mentally ill woman in a crisis situation. Her family called for help and the police came, and tragically she lost her life to the hands of APD. And it didn't have to be that way. And we've been asking ever since then, what are we doing as a city, not just as a police department, but as a city, to say we value every life, and that means there's got to be all hands on deck situations. So mental health is a big component of what I think police officers are dealing with, and concerted leadership from our nonprofit sector and the city of Austin is in order. Again, I feel as though we study and analyze, and then the crisis moves on and it becomes into the back of our mind. I won't accept that, and I have high expectations that Chief Chacon is going to be working collaboratively with different community leaders to make that change. And that includes having social work type of supports that officers need. Years ago, I did a drive along with a member of APD, and I intend to do more of them this year, by the way. But I did see firsthand when the police are called out to a family disturbance, for example. There's tension, there's strife. Our police are having to be put into very difficult situations. And I think that the police department is changing at the hands of Chief Chacon, and I think we should hold them to high expectations so that we can see the change that we want, not just check a box, watch a video, okay, I'm trained.
You know, obviously I think that the mental health aspect is a very important part of, you know, what our officers are dealing with and things that should be run differently. But we also have the aspect of the racial and the racial injustice and sort of this racial reckoning that we're in right now within our country after the death of George Floyd. Are there things you think on that level that need to change as well?
I think what shouldn't change is our temperature and our volume and our heart. I just came off of a difficult year where we fled to Washington to fight for civil rights. And it was impressed upon me that we are in the middle of another civil rights era. And my role was to stand up for the right to vote. So whether for these array of issues that you and I have been talking about, they all come down to democracy, right? But I have no tolerance for those who on day one say Black Lives Matter, but then on day two move on to another topic. It's got to be every day is about Black Lives Matter, about all of us together helping to make this become a better community. So I guess what I'm saying is that when I went to Washington, I felt that we all have a role in continuing to fight for our collective civil rights, and that we're all in this together.
Let's talk about that move to Washington and some
Yeah.
of your time spent in the state capitol. Obviously, you're still within your tenure right now. But there are people who would say the Austin delegation, the city of Austin, has long been the enemy of the big three. It goes back a long time that Austin will pass policies that will then be challenged and forcibly changed. I mean, we're talking about plastic bag bans. We're talking about cutting down trees, things of that nature. If you are elected, do you think you'll be able to mend sort of that relationship with the Capitol and the city, or are Austin's policies always going to be contrary to the Republican leadership of this state?
Mm-hmm. I'm always glass half full. I come from the reason I'm continue to care about politics and to care about making a difference is because I know that what's happening right now is not normal. Our leadership has been catering to an extreme fringe of the electorate, and I don't think that that's where they are in their heart. That means moving forward in every 2-year cycle. I'll do my job, they'll do their job. The taxpayers are better served when we're collaborating and working together instead of beating each other up. This campaign and my tenure as mayor will not be run on my Twitter account. It's going to be about doing my job the best that I can, surrounding myself with good people who are going to help us be the best city possible. And I don't think my job is to engage with folks who maybe have a lot of similarities to me, but publicly have to act like they're very different from me. I know that they're not different from me. I've seen it on the House floor. So, at the end of the day, I want to get stuff done. I don't want to get bogged down in fighting over fake crises.
So is it helpful to have your experience at the Capitol, in the mayor's office?
Yeah, I think it is helpful to have my experience, my legislative experience, and because I remember that the Texas way is to say, what are we going to get done? What can we get done together? That's the true spirit of the Texas legislature. And so many of my colleagues in the House are having a very difficult time right now on both sides of the aisle because we are in a very divisive time. We're fighting over masks. We're fighting over what schools are doing in their libraries, for God's sake. Believe me, this is not their number one issue. So we are in very difficult times, and we've got to work through that. So I'm committed to work across party lines to make positive change for Austin.
Your decision to run now, to step away from the Texas legislature at such a pivotal time, at such a time when we are divisive, and you have been seen as someone who can work across the aisle and someone who builds bridges, why step away from the legislature now?
That's an excellent question. And when I was doing the exploratory process, it was more emotional than I thought it was going to be. I think it was because it was such a difficult year. The breaking of quorum, the extreme right agenda that we couldn't have anticipated so much of that moving through the legislature, and then an emotional night in the third session when I had to give a very passionate speech to say, why can't we just let trans kids put on a school uniform and play basketball? That is, it was impressed upon me that my voice is valuable, that I will be missed in the legislature, but I'm also a woman who's passionate about the worker class, and they say politics is about timing. Everybody has a real estate story right now, hustling for a house, getting an extra job to afford the rent. These are really difficult times for everyday Texans who don't care if I'm a Democrat or a Republican or a Longhorn or an Aggie. They just want to know, do you have my family in the front of mind? And I commit to them that I do.
This race, you're announcing very early, January. We've got all the way until November, and we are
Pace yourself, right?
well, we are expecting, you know, possibly some other big names to announce that they also want to be the mayor of Austin. One I know you're very familiar with, your colleague, former senator, former mayor of Austin, Kurt Watson.
Yeah.
Have you chatted with him at all?
It's been a while. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Watson. Ms. Tovo on council is thinking about running. You know, there's an abundance of talent in this town, but I couldn't delay my decision to say I have the skills to bring to the job. Part of the reason is because I have a big task in front of me. The 11th largest city means you need a budget of close to $1 million in order to run. And the city has said $400 a person, that's your cap. So I'm not a self-funded candidate. I'm not that kind of realtor. I'm just a working girl with a passion for public service. So that means start early, raise the funds that I'm going to need to tell my story, and get to know the city and engage in what I hope will be a people-oriented campaign.
Talk to us about what the next few months are going to look like for you.
It's not going to be normal. I don't want to take any demographic for granted. The Asian community is the largest growing demographic here. The fact that I am very emotional and connected to the fact that we have lost our diversity. We're one of only 3 American cities, I believe, who lost our percentage of African American and Latinos. I am, at the end of the day, also a Chamber of Commerce kind of gal. I've been on the Hispanic Chamber for many years, on their board of directors. So I understand, but I believe I have the pragmatic skills that it's going to take. So for the next few weeks and months, it's build a platform, connect with every corner of the city, be unconventional in my approach, and that's why I call it a people's-oriented campaign, and be available. I'm ready to put my life on a shelf for the next year and reconnect with the city, all the new stuff. Whenever we go to a new part of town and say, when did that come up? When did that get built? You know, I think your station is in a really good job of reminding us about how much we're growing and how much we're changing. And I want to connect with that, build my campaign, and be able to tell my story. I think I've got a good story to tell.
There's a few words you use there talking about building your platform, and you've also mentioned the trajectory of Austin. Is Austin on a good trajectory right now?
If you look at the economic figures, yes. But if you look at at the real workers who are driving that economic engine, no. I
Do
don't.
you blame the council? Do you blame the leadership for some of that?
I feel an urgency to the moment. The real estate market that we all knew was going to happen someday has I think lit a fire under a lot of people, not just for the unhoused, but for those who are trying to buy a house, or for those who are making ends meet and trying, rent is going up. I just feel as though I bring that average, everyday Texan just trying to get things done approach to the job. And it's time to hit the urgent button. So it can't just be the city working by itself. We've got to work with the business community and with our amazing nonprofits who have been working at this for years and years and years. But there's a leadership void and leadership gap, and I think a lack of understanding for what the average Austinite is having to go through to make ends meet.
You know, I have to ask you a bit of a fun question before we wrap stuff up. Austin, obviously, live music capital of the world. We like to think that about ourselves. So tell us your favorite song.
Well, I go back to Stevie Ray Vaughan. There's nothing more motivating than that when you hear him, whether it's, it's flooding in Texas.
One, though. You gotta pick
I have to pick one song. Well, I think it would be to equate what you and I just talked about. There's an urgency that's happening. It would be Texas flood. It's flooding in Texas. People are hurting. Wake up.
Any final thoughts for our viewers?
I think I really just want people to know that I'm not a wealthy person. I'm just a person with a big heart and a lot to give back. I got more gas in the tank, and I've got some good experience to bring. And it's my intention to run a people-oriented campaign for the next several months. So join us at celiafortexas.com.